Oh,
Robert, what's next?
okay. What do we have? Okay. Anthony Hester says, "Greetings, fellow movie fans. Why is it taking so long for Hollywood to get its act together and give us a Masters of the Universe movie? Isn't it a no-brainer? How can movies like A Dog's Way Home get made and no one can get a He-Man movie done? Is it politics? Fans want this movie. Why won't Hollywood listen? Thanks."
Well, there's a couple things here. First of all, you're right. They've been trying to get this Masters of the Universe movie going forever. With a who's lineup of they've had no less than 4 directors attached to this thing. Now, the current director attached to it right now is 2 brothers. I'm trying to remember the name of the 2 guys now. These 2 brothers are directing, who haven't directed anything of note before, okay? Ang Lee was once connected to direct this. That then fell apart. Then David S. Goyer, who of course kind of co-wrote the Dark Knight trilogy with Christopher Nolan and Jonathan Nolan. Unfortunately, he also directed Blade Trinity, which is one of the worst superhero movies of all time. Then John N. Chu, for the longest time, was attached to direct Masters of the Universe. He just did Crazy Rich Asians. Now, he also did Justin Bieber's Never Say Never, and he also did G.I. Joe Retaliation, and he also did Gem and the Holograms. But he did Crazy Rich Asians, and that's actually pretty damn good. So you've had a lot of people attached to this. Now, they just announced, so then we haven't heard anything for a while. Then they just announced these 2 writers have just come on. Writers Matt Holloway and Art Markham are the 2 guys that they just brought on. So they're going to be rewriting the script that David S. Goyer had submitted before they're going to rewrite it. Now, these guys have written a couple of very notable films. Films like Iron Man they did. They did Punisher Warzone, which I love Punisher Warzone. I know a lot of people didn't like Punisher Warzone. I thought it was visceral.
I loved it too. And you know, the director, Lexi Alexander, she's very active on Twitter.
Yeah.
And she's very accessible. You can talk to her.
I've had her in studio before and chatted with her. She's great. These guys also directed the upcoming Men in Black International, which looks really good. Now, of course, they also wrote Transformers: The Last Night, which is probably the worst of the Transformers movies, but a couple of really solid things on their plate. Look, as far as the question, why won't Hollywood give us what we want? Because Hollywood isn't in the business of giving what a couple of people tell them they want. Hollywood is in the business of trying to make money. And they have never been convinced that if we put this thing out, we're going to be able to make money at this point. At least if, we haven't found a way to do it in such a way that will be cost effective and at the same time can make us some money at the box office. Because guess what? Everybody said, just make any Dragon Ball movie and it'll be $1 billion movie.
Right.
And that thing flopped hard. Just put out any Pokemon movie and it's going to be $1 billion. And they flop hard. These guys do got to be a little bit more careful. And it's really easy for us from a fan point of view to think, oh, just make a movie about that property and instantly it'll be $1 billion film. And it's just not that way.
Right.
And look, I would rather them go, look, we haven't solved this Rubik's Cube of Masters of the Universe yet, and wait until they do find the right way to do it, and then take a swing. Because here's the problem. You do a Masters of the Universe movie with He-Man now, and let's say you don't crack the code and you don't get it right, Masters of the Universe is dead for another 10, 15 years. You do it right, and you find a way to do it that can be appealing to those of us who remember. Ray, what's the name of that documentary series you were watching? Power of Grayskull, this documentary that Ray got me watching a bit on Netflix is really, you're not only going to get those people, you got to get the wider movie-going audience.
Oh, yeah.
And once they can find that way, and if they can do it right, then instead of having to wait for 10 to 15 years, we could be getting He-Man movies for the next 10 to 15 years. So, but you got to do it right. You just can't rush into it.
Well, I think you actually nailed it. This is a really tough nut to crack. I read a script, I think it was by Mark Prasevich, is that his last name? Called Grayskull. That was really, this was
great name, by the
this
way.
was like, I don't want to say 10 years ago, 15 years ago. It was really good. But the problem, I think the biggest problem facing a He-Man movie is what kind of a movie is it supposed to be? If you go back and you look at the cartoon, like I understand everyone's nostalgia for it. I actually bought the first run of He-Man figures, the initial Man-at-Arms and Merman and Beastman and He-Man. But if you're trying to adapt that cartoon, it's really goofy, and in this day and age where people are getting Lord of the Rings and the Warcraft movie was a mixed bag.
Yeah.
What is the tone? What would if you were making a He-Man movie? What is the tone?
I had a friend
what
of
would
mine,
you do?
I had a friend of mine who wants to say, "This is how you do a He-Man movie. You do Lord of the Rings meets Star Wars." And that's okay. That sounds easy to say, though. That's
right.
easy to say. A little more difficult to crack that code, but yeah, it's how do you do it? It's a little challenging.
Those recent well, not recent, but over the last 10 years, they were doing these collector versions of the He-Man figures where they made them more, I guess, adult.
Right.
In a way, they made them cooler, not so kid-friendly. Those were cool. Like those designs, like the Wind Rider and the stuff that came out, those were really cool designs. And I'm like, okay, if you took what they did with those toys and then sort of imbued a movie with that coolness, then you could get more Lord of the Rings meets Star Wars. But like you said, that's really hard to do. It's hard. I mean, it's a tough nut to crack.
It is going to be interesting to see how they solve this, what kind of approach they want to take. I mean, but I think we're still a little ways off. I still think we're a little ways off. But hey, at least they've got some movement now, and they're bringing in some new writers.
Absolutely.
All right, let's move on now to the